My name is Mike Foster, the Entrepreneur's Mentor, and welcome to my latest interview in my series of A Zoom With. I regularly share my snippets via my YouTube channel, and these are my thoughts to help you start, develop and grow your business. But this video series is all about introducing you to experts who will share their tips and their thoughts, again, to help you in your own business development. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Bethany Joy. Bethany is a brand voice consultant and copywriter based in Oxfordshire. Welcome, Bethany.
Hi, nice to be here.
Great, thanks for joining us. I've got a few questions for you. But first of all, if you wouldn't mind, just introducing yourself, a bit about you and your business, please.
Yeah, no problem. So you were right about what I do, but actually, technically, my job title on my business card is a brand voice crafter and wordsmith extraordinaire, because that is the beauty of working for yourself. You can call yourself whatever you want. But what that actually translates to in real life is that I work with really passionate, brilliant business people who are really great at doing what they do, but maybe not quite so good at articulating what they do. And I always say that I do my job so that good ideas don't go to waste, because I think we all know that no matter how brilliant an idea is, if you can't communicate it, if you can't help people understand why it's brilliant and inspire them to buy into it, then actually that good idea isn't going much of anywhere. And so that's where I kind of step in, and I usually help people in two key ways, hence my nifty two-part job title. So the first part to do with this idea of being a brand voice crafter is a bit more of a strategic piece, kind of working with people, thinking about the bigger picture of their communications and helping them develop a voice, a style really of communicating with people that actually says something about who they are as a business and what they're like, actually helps communicate some of their business characteristics. And then the second piece is more sort of detailed, is then helping people work that voice out in various bits of marketing. So the kind of wordsmith copywriter element, writing copy for websites, for articles, blogs, video scripts, social media posts, really anything that involves words, English words, and that is in my wheelhouse. So that's me, that's what I do.
Great, thanks for introducing yourself. And the question I'm asking all my interviewees right now is, how are you and your clients finding the current business climate?
Interesting. Interesting. Do you know, I mean, I'm sure everyone's saying the same things. You know, it's tough. It's all new. No one quite knows what they're doing. All that kind of stuff. But I think actually my biggest reflection is that I've been really impressed at how a lot of my clients are handling it, and it's been really interesting and dare I say kind of exciting at points to watch people just be so creative in their responses to things and be really flexible and, you know, look at something and go, okay, well, this is what we planned, but clearly that's not going to work now. So what are we going to go do instead? And, you know, take a minute or two to sort of mourn the fact that, okay, this isn't going to be like we thought it was, but then actually just turning around and going, right, okay, let's think practically. How can we make this offer different? How can we write about this differently? How can we reposition this? How can we take something that was in real life and bring it online? And, you know, I really genuinely feel like I've been really inspired by a lot of my clients, and it's been really interesting. I think it's really fueled my creative process in terms of thinking about how to write and talk about things. So yeah, I mean, obviously in some ways really tough, but I would actually say creatively it's been a challenging but a really fascinating and really kind of positive time, if I'm allowed to say that.
Excellent. Well, that leads me on actually to my first question for you. Is that I think a lot of people right now feel they don't know how to talk to their customers. I mean, most of us have never had to try and market ourselves in the middle of a crisis like this. So how should our communication change in the light of the current situation?
Yeah. Well, you mean you've never lived through a global pandemic before? What? Yeah, no, I mean, it is sort of nuts. And to be honest, there's a lot, you know, we've got a short time together today, and there's a lot of information out there, lots of different ideas for how to communicate now. And you know, there's a lot that could be said. But for me, and certainly the experience I'm having with my clients, I think the really key thing that I would say to any business owners at the moment is that it is really important to change your message, to change what you're saying to people at the moment. But it's also really important not to change your voice and not to change how you're speaking to people. So there is a real feeling at the moment of, oh God, this is so different and everything's changed and my business has changed and the context has changed. This has thrown everything up in the air. What do I do? And almost a feeling of like, I just have to start from scratch with everything again and throw away all these marketing plans and ideas that we've had. And I think there definitely is an element of that. I think in terms of your messaging, in terms of what you're saying to people, yes, I think you probably do have to bite the bullet and make some big changes, partly because probably the reality of people's businesses is that there is a lot of change. So you probably are actually offering maybe slightly different products, slightly different services than you were before, or at least offering them in a different way. Obviously, a lot of things have come online rather than being in real life, all that kind of stuff. So likely there would need to be some changes to your messaging to reflect actual changes to your business. But even if that's not the case, I think, yes, there do need to be changes in your messaging to just reflect and recognize what's going on right now. I think marketing that doesn't at least nod to the current situation does risk sounding a bit tone deaf. I think there are different ways to do it. Some businesses, their whole marketing message will shift to focus on what's going on right now, whereas other businesses maybe just will kind of make a gentle allusion to it, and actually their services and products haven't changed that much. So there's different ways to handle it, and certainly we're far enough into this now that you don't need to start every email communication with "in these unprecedented times." Which is my bingo, like unprecedented is like the new overused word. I think it's replacing innovative as the word that brands use the most. So yeah, you don't need to go over the top with it now. People are becoming a bit more used to it. It's not quite normal yet, but we are a few months into this. But yes, I think if you don't at least mention it, it's everybody's context right now. Yes, your messaging needs to change, but my big thing to people is don't get so sidetracked by those necessary changes that you go overboard and change your whole way of communicating with people. That actually your style of communicating, the organizational personality that you're conveying when you communicate to people, when you market yourselves, it's so important that it stays the same for a couple of reasons. Partly purely for consistency, that actually consistency is important all the time in marketing, but now even more than usual in a time of kind of chaos and lack of clarity and uncertainty, you kind of presenting a really clear, this is the brand we were 2 months ago, and this is the brand we are today, this is the brand we'll be in the future, that kind of clear, reliable, familiar sense of we are who we are, and a crisis doesn't change that. It might change what we do, but it doesn't change who we are. There's something really important about that consistency. And there's also just something about the authenticity of actually, again, now more than ever, people want to feel that they're being spoken to by people, by a team, a group of people, not some nameless, faceless corporation. And there's a real temptation, I think, because the situation in lots of ways is very serious. There's a temptation to suddenly start speaking to people in a very formal, almost quite a detached, kind of mimicking a government communications kind of, we're monitoring the situation and health and safety and it's not to say that it's not good to mention those things, to talk about how you're keeping your employers or your customers safe. All that stuff is really important, but keep doing that in a way that is true to the way that you normally communicate with people. So if you're normally quite straight-laced or maybe fairly highbrow, maybe you're an academic institution, fine, great, keep that tone, keep doing that. But actually, if you're normally a bit more quirky, maybe you're a bit sarcastic, maybe you're really straight talking and a bit sweary as a business, who knows what your style is, don't be afraid to keep doing that. Don't lose your personality just because we're in the middle of a crisis. Definitely hold on to that. Keep sounding like you normally sound. A really good example of that I saw recently was the company Brewdog, the beer guys. They definitely as a brand have a big personality, and a couple of weeks ago they started, I think they're using some of their distilleries to make hand sanitizer, which I don't even think they're selling it. I think they're just giving it away. But either way, they are a really nice example of someone who they've had this huge change in terms of, this is like a whole new product essentially that they're offering, and there's hugely different messaging around that. Obviously hand sanitizer is completely different in terms of how you market it to beer. So huge change in the message and the product, but actually their voice is still just the same as ever. And on the packaging of it, they've even called it Brew Gel Punk Sanitizer. And they've got kind of copy on the bottle about it being a postmodern classic, which I think is quite an amusing touch. And that their brand is fiercely defiant and independent. They've still got all that same kind of voice coming through. And like in the tweet where they announced it, there's a bit of joking often about how their marketing can be quite sweary. And so their sort of headline in the tweet is, "It's time to keep it clean." And obviously the nice double entendre there with the hand sanitizer. So yeah, it's just a small example, but yes, your messaging is going to change, and go with that, realize the context, but don't go too far. Hang on to your voice. Your message needs to be responsive to the virus, but actually your voice needs to be resistant and needs to stay as it is.
Excellent. That's some really good tips in there. And I love the whole thing about being consistent with voice, because I think people have sort of tried to change their voice to match what they think people think they should be saying, rather than still being themselves, or perhaps even being afraid to promote themselves at this time. So, when we're making these adjustments for our messaging, then how can we feel that whether we're hitting the right tone or not? How do we measure that, if you like?
Yeah. It's really funny. I've been having some really funny conversations with some of my clients at the moment, because there's a particular piece of advice that I always give people. If anyone's worked with me before, you'll almost certainly have heard me say this thing, and I tell it to all my clients all the time. And then now in this situation, totally different, I'm literally kind of taking that piece of advice and turning it on its head and saying, no, don't listen to that anymore, do the opposite, effectively. And so normally when I'm creating new bits of comms and marketing with clients, I'll always say to them, one of my kind of mantras is, it doesn't matter what you think about it, it matters what your clients think about it. So it's basically sort of saying to people, actually, often founders, owners, marketing people, sometimes they have some things in common with their audience, but often they don't. Often they're very different. And so it's really important when you create things to be able to put your own personal preferences, your own personal likes and dislikes about this color and that font and that word, to be able to put that to one side and actually say, what really matters is this email, is this piece of copy, is this ad really going to connect with my target audience? They're the ones that matter, ultimately, not you. So I say that all the time to my clients, and I'm basically constantly saying, your opinion doesn't matter, in a nice way, but what you think doesn't matter. Whereas actually at the moment, I really think one of the best ways, it sounds so simple, but one of the best ways to know if you're kind of hitting the tone right, if you're hitting the mark, is actually just to ask yourself how you feel about it, how you think about it. Because the really fascinating thing about marketing in this time, a kind of silver lining of the virus, if you want one, is that you have never been this close to your audience before. This is probably the most in common that you may ever have with them, in terms of context and just how we're all feeling at the moment. Everyone's circumstances slightly different. Some people have kids, some people are working, some people have been furloughed. It's there's some differences there, but we've got some huge common ground emotionally and contextually at the moment. We're all feeling sort of loneliness and missing friends and family. We're all feeling incredibly uncertain about our health, about our jobs, about the future. We're all getting kind of cabin fever and getting fed up of not being able to go out. There's so much in terms of our daily emotional context that is shared at the moment. Actually, for once, your gut reaction to a piece of marketing is much more likely to be spot on than it ever is in normal times. So actually, when you create something, when you're writing that kind of sales email, or when you're putting together some social posts, when you're thinking about new campaigns, maybe, honestly, actually just taking that chance to read it through and go, what would I feel if I got this? Maybe you've tried to use a bit of humor to lighten things up. If you read it and go, if I got this, would I laugh, or would I think, oh, that's a bit close to the bone? Or, do I feel like this is a bit brash and salesy and aggressive? Or actually, yeah, I feel like they just get what I'm going through and they want to help me and they're offering a solution. Just genuinely, it sounds so simple, but I really think it's more true than it's ever been. Just reading something through and seeing what is my gut reaction, or secondarily to that, maybe asking someone else who's stuck at home with you, a husband, a wife, a child, or whatever, saying, actually, what would you think if you got this? I really think that is so valuable at the moment, because we've got so much shared emotional context. So I think your gut actually is a good thing to go with at this point.
And again, really useful. I wish I'd have interviewed you a few weeks ago, because I think many people that probably be watching this video know that I love a little bit about my social media. I love posting a few things and sharing a few things. And I went through that reflective moment for myself, because I knew that people had to stay positive. I knew that people had to plan a way through the lockdown to survive it, and ultimately, as I'm calling it, thrive out the other side.
Yeah.
But I also felt that people didn't need me telling them to do that. It's So yeah, I wish I'd have probably listened to that 2 weeks ago. So linking into that, then, what advice would you give to a business who is just feeling a bit of a loss at the moment, to know how to position their products or service with relevance at the moment?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing is definitely, you're not alone. Everyone is definitely navigating this time with a bit of hesitancy, because it's also so new. But I think another thing I've really seen over the last couple of weeks and months working with different clients is that, generally speaking, businesses are falling into, I think, one of three kind of categories in terms of what their relevance is to people at the moment. And I think the important thing is to identify kind of which category you're in, and then make some decisions about your marketing based off that. So from what I've seen, I'm seeing businesses fall into these categories. The first one being businesses that are really just very clearly serving a legitimate need in the time of lockdown. So potentially something that either was a need before but wasn't a need so strongly, or just something that's continued being a need and is quite a clear, important, basic thing. So examples of that would be like supermarkets are an obvious one, but also banks, accountants. Think about companies like Zoom, who are pretty much making a killing out of this. Any kind of online payment providers, online conference call type things, stuff like Microsoft Teams. Things that are really meeting a specific need, or even maybe meeting a new need that's been created because of lockdown, particularly. That's kind of category one. And then I would say category two are businesses that they're not meeting a need of lockdown per se, but they're meeting a want or a desire that has grown because of lockdown. So, for example, loads of like craft type stores are doing so well at the moment because people are really stuck at home, and especially if they've been furloughed, they're like, okay, I need a new hobby, or I'm going to take up knitting, or I'm going to order this papier-mâché kit, or I've seen so much online of people kind of taking up new crafts, new hobbies, people who are getting like cocktails delivered to their homes so they can have a night in, or do a Zoom cocktail evening with friends. A lot of people, even though they're not going out as much, are doing a more online shopping in terms of buying clothes and things, thinking ahead to when there will be people to see them in their outfits from the waist down, not just the waist up. So companies like that it's not a specific need, but maybe because of lockdown, there's something that they're bored, they need more entertaining, there's something kind of fun and interesting that brand can offer. And then there is a third category where there are some brands that, the reality of it is, no matter how hard they try, no matter how creative they are, they really aren't particularly able to sell many of their products or services at the moment. So particularly thinking about maybe restaurants and bars, some of them might be able to operate like a home delivery service, but lots of them just aren't able to do that from a kind of manpower perspective. That's just not possible, or there isn't much take up for it in their local area and that kind of thing. So there definitely are, I think they're in the minority actually, but there are definitely some brands where their products and services just aren't applicable right now. So from my experience, those are the three kind of categories that people are falling into. And so I think the trick is to figure out which one you are and make some decisions about your marketing out of that. So for example, the first category, broadly speaking, I think some trends in marketing in that category is really about keeping it simple and not kind of over egging the pudding. So the reality is, if you are in that first category of being something that's actually meeting a real legitimate need, so maybe you're like a courier service, or you provide some kind of online like a payment system, or like an accountant, something like that, you've got a real legitimate, people actually need this right now, then actually the reality is your service is probably sort of selling itself. People recognize they have that need, they know they have that need. So actually keeping it really simple, making it really obvious, really clear how you can meet people's needs, and not trying to be too quirky or too clever, but actually just make it really simple, really easy. And actually your main job, sounds silly, your main job is to get out of your own way. That actually people will recognize that need. There's a really clear need for your services. Just don't put any obstacles in front of them. Make it clear, make it simple, make it engaging, but just keep it simple. I think that's probably the best advice for the first group. I think in the second group, I'll admit that's where I'm having the most fun with my clients. That I think there's so much creativity in there. So I've got one of my clients who, bless her, it's a piano school. So they've had to figure out how they teach children piano lessons. They've had to figure out how to take those all online. And that, I mean, obviously the detail of that's a business thing, not a marketing thing, but that's been amazing to watch her do that. But just thinking with them about how they might market some of those, and another like ethical underwear company that, I mean, in a way, they were thinking, oh, how do we position ourselves now? But actually there's so much, thinking about one campaign about how now, particularly for women, now that you're at home all the time and you don't have to go out, now's the perfect time to try that non-underwire bra that you've been keen to try but too scared to go out in public in. And I've got kind of endless examples, but there's I think there's a lot more fun to be had there, because a lot of those products are in the kind of, they're providing a distraction. So they're not meeting a need, but they are helping people through lockdown in a really positive, but quite a fun and light-hearted sort of way. So there's a lot more room for humor. There's a bit more room to be slightly clever, slightly cheeky, and to not you don't need to write loads of information about safeguarding and monitoring the situation. And there's not a lot of that detail. It's much more about how can we make life in lockdown better with these things that we've got to offer you. So there's a lot of room for creativity there, I think. And then in that third category as well, I also think there's loads of room, loads of possibility and opportunity there that I'll completely acknowledge. It depends on the financial situation of your business. That obviously, if losing all your business completely has really screwed you over, then I'm really sorry about that. And I understand that there may be some businesses that just, unfortunately, this is the end, and sadly I think that will be the case for some people. But if you've got the ability to kind of keep on going, even without particularly making a lot of sales on your products or services, then actually now is an amazing time just to be building your brand and to be establishing yourself as a brand that's useful, that's helpful, that's entertaining. So I'm thinking about lots of restaurants or bars that have got a great opportunity for, here's 5 cocktail recipes you can try at home. Lots of kind of content marketing, so a lot of great stuff to put out there for ideas of what people can do. And I think was it Burger King, I think, in France, that did a great campaign about all the local supermarket ingredients needed to make a Burger King burger at home. So that was a really good ad. So lots of things like that, of just recognizing, okay, people might not be able to actually spend money with you now, but how can you show yourself to be useful, to be entertaining, to be inspiring, and put great content out there so that later on, when they are in a position to buy, when lockdown is at some point lifted, that you've made your presence known and you've established yourself as a great brand. So I mean, lots to say. I'm sure I've gone on way longer than your 10 minutes, but basically I think the key there is figuring out which one of those sort of compartments your brand fits into best, and taking your lead from that.
Right. I mean, you're breaking it down into the three elements. I think people will be able to identify specifically now and in the future which one of those that they sit in. And again, some great advice that you've passed on there. So thank you, Bethany. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for sharing with us not only your thoughts but also your energy and your passion for what you do. So thank you very much for joining me and sharing those thoughts.
That's a very polite way of saying you're very talkative, Beth.
So thanks again. So please subscribe to my YouTube channel and get notified each time I publish a new interview. And I'll see you next time for a Zoom with whoever's next.